Legions Imperialis is small, and, for most of its infantry, are single pieces. But is it too small for anything other than just painting? Well, considering that Games Workshop sent me an early copy of the game, in this video I'm going to try and find out if Legions Imperialis is too small to kitbash. But first, we have this video's sponsor, me. You may be aware of my Kickstarter campaign that is currently running to get a full kit of just dead animal bits made. It will be packed full of bones, skulls, horns, severed heads, hands on spikes, feathers, and more. And the best part, it will all be in hard plastic, arguably the best material for the converter who wants to clip, file, shave, trim, or even melt their pieces to get the exact results that they need. But it needs your help to become a reality, which is where Kickstarter comes in. So, if you're interested in learning more about the project or even pledging your support, I'll include some links to the campaign down in the description. And a big thank you to all of you who have supported the project so far. So, with that out of the way, let's get back to converting some tiny Space Marines. I began with one of the smallest units that the starter box comes with, the regular Tactical Marines. But before any modification could be made, I needed a way to actually hold onto them as I worked. Gluing them to all their bases would be impractical. So they were instead glued in a line to a thin strip of bamboo. By spacing them out enough, it meant that I easily access each one while still having something a little more substantial to hold onto. The box art had the Marines painted up as the Death Guard, but they looked distinctly un-Nurglified. As Plague Marines existed during the Siege of Terror, creating some Nurgle-corrupted Marines seemed like a good direction to go in. To replicate the effect of decaying armor, a pin vise with a few small gauge drill bits were used to create some shallow divots. A few of these were scattered around various parts of the Marine to give the army the appearance of rotting away. Similarly, a few nicks and chips were then cut into the Sergeant's sword using my scalpel, helping to replicate that plague weapon effect. Due to the very small scale of the Marines and the fact that they were mostly single pieces, finding parts from other kits proved tricky. So instead of relying on spare bits, I instead created my own using green stuff. A small batch was cut and mixed, and a very small ball was pressed onto the stomach area of the unit's leader. Using a mixture of metal and rubber tip tools, the green stuff was shaped and blended into the surrounding armor. A few folds and creases were added to replicate the bulging and sagging flesh of those blessed by Nurgle. This process was repeated across the other members of the squad, with various other mutations such as proboscis-like protrusions from the helmet, tentacled forearms, and bulbous legs. During this process, I made sure to keep my tools, fingers, and surfaces coated with a small amount of Vaseline to prevent the putty from sticking as I worked it. But this wasn't the only modification that could be made to the Space Marines in the Legion Imperialis box. When it came to tackling the Cataphractii Terminators, I had a better time finding parts that could be used with this scale. But first, I needed to carefully clip and trim away the combi bolters from the hands. Once these had been removed, they could be replaced with the small tilt shields from the full-size Cataphractii kit. Against these miniatures, they were effectively full-size shields and would allow me to recreate the appearance of a Storm Shield armed Cataphractii. After clipping away and flattening out the back of the shield, it was then glued to each Marine in the squad, helping to give them more of an Imperial Fist appearance. But it wasn't just the infantry that could be modified. When it came to the vehicles, things were a little easier. The larger size and multi-part aspect generally made it easy to tweak parts and find other parts that scaled well, but it also provided a larger surface in which to add more intricate green stuff details, which would allow me to create a Sons of Horus Contemptor Dreadnought. A little more green stuff was rolled out into some thin strands, and one of these was laid across the central ridge of the torso to create an embossed trim. This was followed up with another strand just below the helmet. The Sons of Horus eye symbol was then created, with a semicircle being placed below the gorget to trace the outline of the eye. One final piece was placed in the center to create the pupil. The trim was then finished off with a couple of extra pieces being added to the shoulder pads. With all the pieces in place, they were allowed to fully cure. These additional pieces of detail would help to give the model a more ornate and distinct appearance, whilst also helping to replicate a Sons of Horus Contemptor Dreadnought in appearance. The final miniature in Legions Imperialis that I attempted to convert was one of the tanks, specifically a Sicarian, and what better Legion to build it as than the White Scars. While there weren't many kits that fit the scale of Legions, the scenery from Adeptus Titanicus is sized similarly. Inside the Manufactorum Imperialis kit were a few barrels that, after having one side shaved and flattened, could be glued to the back of the Sicarian. These were positioned low enough so as to not impede the traversal of the turret. The result was that of some extra fuel storage to help increase the operational range of the tank, or maybe counteract the effects of the White Scar's lead feet. There were also a few parts that could be taken from the full-scale kits too, albeit with a little modification. This particular vehicle symbol was sourced from a Horus Heresy kit, and while it was clearly too large for this tiny tank, I was only interested in the lightning bolts at the bottom. Both of these were clipped away, trimmed, and glued to the side of the tank, where they became White Scar lightning bolts. Admittedly, the bolts were maybe a little too thick for the model of this size, but it's not all that noticeable. So, with that, all that's left to do now was to paint up each of these units in their respective Legion colours, which left me with these. And so, in answer to the question that I posed at the beginning of this video, is Legion Imperialis too small to kitbash? Well, no. It's certainly trickier, and I can't rely on my usual toolset of bits, but there are definitely plenty of options, providing you don't mind getting a little bit more creative with parts and aren't worried about doing a bit of sculpting. Hopefully this video has given you a few ideas to try out on your own Legion minis, and if you'd like to see me continue this smaller scale of conversion again, then please do let me know in the comments. Like I said earlier, my Kickstarter for a fully plastic Dead Animal Bits kit is live right now and will be running until December the 18th. So if you want to help bring this project to life and be among the first to get your hands on the finished kit, you can find all the details down in the description below. Now, before I go, let me just say a big thank you to my Patreon supporters and channel members who help keep this channel going, especially my Pouch of Dead Animal Bits tier and above supporters, who are Jonathan Hart, Maciej Sawicki, Pops of Corn, Ryan Little, Swedsman, Tim, Andrew Console, Axel Jonsson, Daniel Dowling, Immaterial Creations, Jonathan Sandsteed, Mr. Grimm, and Palejuice. And my Sergeant level channel members, who are Kermit, Mr. Jared Hess 95, David, John Gibbs, The Sire Acquired, Philippoia, Nerdington Paints, Mark Taylor, and Whale Tussler. If you're interested in supporting me, you can hit the join button below or find a link to my Patreon in the description. Supporters get a whole host of benefits, including ad-free access to my videos, sneak peeks, a private Discord channel, and exclusive merchandise. Speaking of merchandise, I also have a few t-shirts and mugs up for sale featuring designs drawn by me. You can check those out by following the links below or by going over to PeteTheWargamer.com. So until next time, thanks for watching and goodbye.